Let's gear up for a state and federal budget conversation with Becca Delahunt from the Minnesota Family Council up next. All right, well, hello families. We are back with some great content for you today. Over the summer we have great guests drop by Chapel Hill Academy, and today we have a very special guest, Becca Delahunt. She is from the Minnesota Family Council, and we feel this is really important information for all of you to be aware of, all of our families and Minnesota families. And so we're bringing this to you as we are looking ahead to the fall and an election year. And so there's a lot of content here, a lot of information that's very relevant to families, Christian families, families who are part of non-public education especially. So we're going to get to know Becca and touch on some very pertinent topics that are before us in public policy. So welcome,
Cassie.
Becca.
Thank you so much, Cassie. It's an honor to be with you.
Thank you. Why don't we first of all get to know you, share your background, how you came to this position in Minnesota Family Council, and you can also share what is the MFC, Minnesota Family Council.
I'd be happy to do that. Well, again, thanks so much for having me, Cassie. I'm Becca Delahunt, and I work now as Director of Public Policy with Minnesota Family Council, and we'll get into what all of that means. But I have a degree in marketing and a minor in business analytics. I worked for a few years in data consulting, and then I felt God calling me to work in public issues that are really dealing with key social things that are basic biblical questions, defending life, defending the reality that we're male and female, religious freedom. And God led me to Minnesota Family Council. So now I work in public policy. I'm a registered lobbyist with the state, which is not something that I expected to do.
Wow, good for you.
Thank you. When you are growing up, you're not expecting to be a lobbyist. That's not necessarily something you have in mind, but God led me, and it's been a great job for me. So we are the Protestant evangelical voice in Minnesota at St. Paul, and our mission is to represent your values of protecting life, family, and religious freedom, and to keep you informed so you know how to engage. So I'll put a plug in here, and I'm sure I will again. Sign up for our emails at mfc.org. And then, so we keep you informed. And then most importantly, we represent Christ in the public square, and I'll get into how we do that. So that's our mission. And our vision is to see Minnesota cherish life, get laws passed that protect the family, and then also defend religious freedom, all for the glory of Jesus Christ. So those are our three main umbrella values, and I can get into our initiatives if you would like me to do that too.
That is so fantastic, and I don't know how many families even knew there was such a thing as the Minnesota Family Council to represent our voice as Christians in the public platform, the public eye. So thank you so much for the hard work that you do.
Thank you.
You represent that voice.
Thank you, Cassie.
And
it's really a joy.
I want to just touch on one point that sometimes when we get into an election year, and we have posted the Minnesota Voters Guide. I know that Minnesota Family Council is nonpartisan. Can you share more about that, just so that we are recognizing that there's different viewpoints? However, we want to make sure that all of our viewpoints as believers really are biblically founded.
Absolutely. Right? Yes. Thanks, Cassie.
Yes.
Well, we are a very unique organization working in the public policy space in Minnesota. We're the only gospel first and focused public policy organization. We have three main initiatives. I lead our public policy efforts together with my colleague Renee Carlson. And so the way I like to explain public policy is Minnesota has books and books of statutes, state law, and public policy is the process of looking to change that. So to add something new, to take something away, or to amend something. And that's what lawmakers are doing during the legislative process. And we work on a variety of issues of public policy. Some of them, unfortunately, have become more partisan, like protecting the life of the unborn. It should not be partisan, but it's key to our biblical values. And then other things that we engage in are not as partisan. We're opposed to the legalization of mobile sports betting, for example. We work on protecting kids online, and those things don't fall as much on partisan lines. So that's our public policy arm. We also have our legal arm, which is True North Legal. and they work to represent life, family, and religious freedom in courts and public policy as well. They have a variety of clients that they do pro bono work for. Cities Church is kind of their like headline client that folks who are listening might be aware of that situation. And then I would say our most unique initiative is our Church Ambassador Network, which brings the ministers of the church to meet with ministers of government, develop relationships, share the gospel with both lawmakers and staff, and develop long-term relationships. So that's a
Wow, that
very
is
unique
a
initiative.
lot. And
Yeah.
it's so good to know that exists.
Yes.
I think for us as Christians, it's important to note that in the political realm, our vote, our perspective should be positioned on biblical worldview.
Yes.
And so that's really what we want to help support in our families is what is on the docket?
Yeah.
What are those issues that are very important for families? And how can our faith really help further that those initiatives?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. It sounds like we're very aligned.
Aligned. Okay, what
Yeah.
would you say is maybe the most relevant topic of the day for
Yeah.
Christian families?
Yes. Well, there's so many relevant topics for Christian families. I would say for Chapel Hill Academy families specifically, we could get into proposed cuts to non-public pupil aid and non-public pupil transportation. I will preface all of this by saying that one of our key values under protecting the family is parental decision-making in education. We think that's really key and formative to parents, raising their own families.
Right.
And so keeping this access to non-public pupil aid and transportation is really key. So I'd love to get into that. I think you mentioned that your families take advantage of those things.
We do have non-public aid that we receive, and it's something that our students deserve because our families are taxpayers.
Right.
And so the state has, over the years, supported certain things, test materials and curriculum. However, if it's a Christian curriculum, they don't.
Sure.
It has to be faith-based.
Okay.
But the transportation and the non-public aid was sort of in the public eye about a year or so ago when it was discussed as maybe possibly being cut.
Right.
Where are we at in that process?
Yes. So Minnesota sets its 2-year budget every year after an election. So we call that a biennium, I might use that word. And the governor's office works in tandem with the legislature to develop a state budget because for something to pass and become state law, identical legislation has to pass the House of Representatives, the Minnesota Senate, and then the governor signs it into law. Part of his proposed budget was completely eliminating non-public pupil aid and non-public pupil transportation, which was very unfortunate because as we'll see, this was hugely important to so many families. There was a testimony of one woman who relies on the aid that goes to transportation because she's a single mom, she's working, she can't get her daughter to this inner city non-public school, but she relies on the funding that comes from the government to go to this aid, this non-public pupil transportation. I checked my notes on this, Cassie. The funding that goes toward this aid and transportation is less than half of a percentage point of the state education budget for the biennium. So that's not the whole statewide budget, that's just the education budget. This is a very small funding stream, but hugely important for so many families, very impactful. And we agree that we should, not invest in spending where it's not necessary. And yet we think funding that goes directly towards student education and families pursuing the right option for them is not something that should be cut. There's other things to look at cutting first. And so we were very happy that that did not go through. Something that's very key to the most recent legislative session is the fact that the Minnesota House split in the most recent election. So in 2024, we had 67 Republican House members and 67 Democrat House members, which is wild. That's only happened once before in Minnesota history. The Senate has a slim Democrat majority, and then Governor Walz is obviously a Democrat. So the parties had to work together. House Republicans held the line on this in budget negotiations, and it didn't pass. And so this was upheld for the near future. I think we're going to get into this more, but Governor Walz has brought up cutting this again. So it's not just a one and done.
Can you share with us just maybe perspective on what is motivating the attack on non-publics? There's lots of things that could be cut if money is an issue.
Right.
But this impacts many, many children, thousands and thousands of children. in our state. Why this?
Right. I know. It's a great question. And I think it's very confusing to a lot of Minnesotans, but we know that if the financial opportunity exists for families to seek the right education opportunity for them, and it's not maybe public school or their local public school, that means that the district is not getting the dollars following the student. And so, unfortunately, Governor Walz is very aligned with the teachers union, which is really strong on keeping, as they like to call it, butts in seats. And so, unfortunately, this has just become something that Governor Walz really isn't willing to budge on. And like I shared, we're a nonpartisan organization. There's different issues that we work on that have bipartisan support or opposition, but this is something that has become, unfortunately, more partisan. And we believe that it shouldn't be, because Minnesota families should get the right education opportunity for them. Yeah, right.
Okay, and this sort of leads into the federal education tax credit issue. And a lot of states are opting into this.
Yep.
Minnesota is one state that is not, and I feel like the heels are being dug in on this one. Would you please explain what this is and how it could be such a benefit for all students in the state of Minnesota?
Absolutely. Yeah, so in 2025, the federal budget passed a groundbreaking education tax credit. It's called the Education Freedom Tax Credit. It's the first ever federal education credit. And for participating states, taxpayers can donate up to $1,700 to a qualified scholarship granting organization. And taxpayers can begin claiming that in January of next year. So when taxpayers donate that $1,700 to a qualified scholarship granting organization, or SGO, they can be awarded to students for a variety of services in any education setting, so public or private, but think about like tutoring, special needs services, education technology, a variety of services. And participation does not redirect state education funds. It's based on voluntary donations. And it's been estimated that just millions of students across the US will benefit. There's one holdup that came up in negotiations right at the end of the federal budget negotiations, and that's that governors have to opt their states in to participate, which is unfortunate because then Governor Walz came out and said very decisively, he said it's never going to happen, to quote him, which is wild. Good news is that for families hoping to claim this credit for students in Minnesota, governors can opt in year after calendar year, and Governor Walz is not running for re-election. And so, maybe a future governor will opt the state into this tax credit, but there's been a lot of inaccurate discussion about this. And so I'd love to clear that up. Yeah.
So do you happen to know those who are throwing their hat in the ring, so to speak, for the gubernatorial race, what their perspectives are with this federal tax credit? So if Walz is completing his term, we have a new governor, those individuals who are trying to get that seat, what have you heard?
Yeah, I am not sure where Amy Klobuchar is running for governor. I'm not exactly sure where she stands. A lot of Republican governors across the country have opted their states in, but it's not always the case that Democrat governors have opted their states out. Wisconsin opted their state in, and I believe Kathy Hochul, who is governor of New York, she's indicated that they're likely to opt in. And so it doesn't have to come down on partisan lines, and I'm hopeful that we can continue to apply the pressure. We sent out a notice to our email list encouraging folks to contact the governor. We have a scripted email, and that's still available that we can provide to your families to encourage Governor Walz, and then when he's out, the next governor to opt in. But I just want to reiterate that this federal tax credit program will exist whether Minnesota opts in or not. So adults can claim the credit. We could donate to an SGO in another state. And the people who are losing out, sadly, are the kids, the students in Minnesota.
Yeah. So if this would help all students, not just non-publics.
Yes.
What is the motivation here? How is the teachers union supporting the opt-out when their students could also benefit, not just students in private schools?
I think, it's hard to say exactly, but the talking points that I've heard used in committees against this and that Governor Walz has stated publicly is that they're saying this will divert dollars away from the public school system. But again, this is not changing the Minnesota education budget. It's not changing the federal education budget. Obviously, a tax credit reduces federal tax dollars, but if it's going directly to students from people who are making donations, we think that that's actually a better use of money. We've also heard it described by Governor Walz as a voucher program, and it's not that either. Again, it's private voluntary donations made and credits being claimed on that.
You mentioned something that we're always talking about here is, vouchers or
Yeah.
ESAs. Is there any rumblings in at the state level with
Yes.
the future of Minnesota?
Yeah.
Like that?
Well, that's always in discussion, Cassie, and lawmakers are, particularly on the right side of the aisle, are advocating for those things. There was a discussion in the Education House Committee. So I mentioned that the House is split 67 Republicans, 67 Democrats. That meant that the committee leadership had to be shared by members of both parties. So one of the days that the House Republican held the gavel in the Education Committee, they had a hearing about school choice. And we will continue to advocate for that. Unfortunately, it didn't get too far this year, but we know that that's a great way to just really lift a state up, is to give kids the best educational opportunity for them, give families that opportunity.
Family choice.
Yep. So we'll continue to advocate for that.
And some of our neighboring states are well on their way.
Yes.
In that area.
Yeah.
So I think Iowa has really got a great
Yes,
program.
I've heard that.
Wisconsin's got some small steps toward that, I believe. Is that correct? Or is that something? Do you know much about that?
I do not. I can't
Okay.
speak to Wisconsin.
I know there are some neighboring states and some states coming along with
Yeah.
their voucher programs, but
Yep.
we're just not there.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
continue to pray about that.
Yes. Right.
So we've got a good foundational understanding of what's happening at the state level with some of this policy, the funding and tax credits. Let's move on now to another very important issue to our families, is school safety. What are some developments at the state level regarding school safety and funding for non-public education?
Yes. Yep. Well, like I mentioned, the House is split between Republicans and Democrats, and so getting dollars to school safety was a part of the end of session discussion. And there was a small amount of money that went toward non-public school safety. 1.7 million is going to be appropriated for a one-time investment in non-public school safety, and some other frameworks were established as well for school safety. So an anonymous threat reporting system that schools can decide to use was established within this final budget negotiations. School districts do not have to take this, but they can elect to opt into that. But the safety aid appropriated to non-public schools, we're thankful for it, but it was pretty small. It was a one-time thing. But I think it's going to become more of a discussion, sadly, with everything that happened with Annunciation last year with the school shooting. And we want to ensure that all students are protected, not just public or charter schools, but non-public students as well.
Great. And when were those funds made available to non-publics?
So they will be available, I believe they're starting in fiscal year 2027 and they will extend until 2029. So it's a little bit in the future. Yeah.
Good steps.
Yeah, good steps. It's a start.
Yes. Now swinging to another topic that I know is on the hearts of a lot of our parents with their kids is sports.
Yes.
Just touch on a little bit with the decisions regarding youth sports, high school sports in Minnesota.
Absolutely. Yes. So I think you're referring to protecting sports, especially for girl athletes. Yes, because we have this issue in Minnesota and many other states where males are claiming to be girls and they're playing in athletics. It's disrupting the safety of the athletic environment for the girls, and then also, of course, removing positions from girl athletes and then titles as well, and trophies and all of that. And so we're very concerned, particularly that biological reality is being undermined. Like I mentioned earlier in our discussion, we're a Christian organization, and we believe key to that mission is upholding the fact that God created us male and female, and those have tangible realities that can be felt, like being in a locker room getting ready for your practice with a male when you're a 16-year-old girl. And so something that's been key to MFC's work in recent years is working to protect athletics for girls who have those athletic opportunities. Athletic opportunities are so important, and they're so important for developing and maturing us when we're growing up. but especially because that's where the discussion is happening about what it means to be male and what it means to be female. So in the divided legislature, we brought the discussion forward about protecting athletics for girls, and it came to discussion on the House floor. At one point this legislative session, and there was a committee hearing in 2025 as well on this bill. Unfortunately, this is a very partisan issue in Minnesota. I don't think that's the case necessarily across the country, but it didn't advance on partisan lines. And so we're going to continue to advocate for that because
for that.
Yes,
it's very important work that you're doing in the
Thank
whole
you.
organization. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so we've talked a lot about some things that have happened that are difficult to hear from a non-public perspective. What are some victories that we can celebrate that have happened this past legislative session?
Yes. Well, not a ton of things happened this legislative session overall, except for one major landmark victory from our perspective, and that is protecting kids on social media. It's very rare that a new public policy idea gets brought forward that is such a landmark issue and it gets passed within 1 year, but that's what happened. And we really want to, first of all, give credit to God because I was shocked by this. I mean, we put in a lot of hard work to get this passed, but we are very concerned about the fact that these large multi-billion-dollar tech companies are, tracking our kids' data, selling them to third-party companies and selling them advertisements. Our kids are the product to these companies and the advertisers are the customers. And we can't think of any other situation in which kids sign terms and conditions or a contract for a product that consumes so much of their day. I looked at a Gallup poll that said that teens spend on average a fifth of their day on these platforms. And so we worked with a coalition and some national partners on a proposal that would first require these platforms to get parental consent for users 15 and younger. They're already estimating our age. They have a very good idea of how old we are. And interestingly enough, parental consent is something that already exists, but they have not been required to comply with getting parental consent. So we're just saying, get parental consent for users 15 and younger, and when consent is given, then the user experience for the child has to be different. So no advertisements and no addictive features like infinite scroll and autoplay video. Yeah.
This is great.
I'm very excited, Cassie. It was one of those things that people were excited about. Lawmakers liked this politically, but then it felt like all the contract lobbyists in the building are working for various tech clients. And so even though politically it was favorable, it did feel like a David and Goliath battle up until the end, but it passed. You wouldn't guess that based on the vote totals. It was very close to unanimous, praise the Lord. So there's going to be a little bit of time until this takes effect because within negotiations, it was determined we need to give these companies some time to comply. So this should take effect July 2027.
Okay, so that's not too far. It's a year away.
Yeah, it's a year away.
Can you explain what that means for families? So I'm a 14-year-old and I got my phone and I want to sign up for a particular social media platform. I can just sign up in the past. How does that look different? How is it monitored or managed to make sure these companies are following the law?
Right. Well, like I mentioned, these platforms are already, as soon as we're on the platform, they're estimating our age and trying to determine different demographics about us to send us advertisements. And so if you're 14 and you sign up for a platform and you're using it, we give specifications within the bill as to how much time these companies have to make an estimation of the age. And if they determine we think this user is under 16 years old, then they have to get parental consent. I mentioned that parental consent is supposed to be already gotten for users under 13. It's getting a little in the weeds, but it's called the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, and it's a federal law, but there was some loopholes in it and hasn't been complied with. These companies are already supposed to be getting parental consent for users under 13, and it's pretty simple as to how they get that. They can require a phone call to a toll-free number. You can upload various forms of information to confirm that your child can be on the platform. And if it's not given, then the account is shut down. So this is technology that already exists, and they're supposed to be complying with it, but they have not been complying thus far. And so the enforcement of this bill, we think, will force compliance, and we're excited to hold these companies accountable.
So like anything, it's probably not foolproof. Like
Right.
there are ways around all kinds of things, but it's there. The law is made, it passed,
Yep.
and so it's a
Yep.
wonderful step
Yes.
to the
Yep.
protecting kids.
Right.
Good. Thank you
Yep.
so much for
Yeah.
sharing that and
Thank you,
all the work
Kathy.
that's gone into that
Yeah.
change. We really support families and having them very involved at our school. We are
Yeah.
partnering with families all the time, and in the media and the culture, you've heard a lot of organizations and perspectives pushing parents out of the way,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to medical decisions and
Right.
things like that. So I know there's been some development with
Yes.
the MMR vaccination. That's
Yes.
something parents should be aware of. Can you
Right.
share more about that update?
Absolutely. Yeah, so there has been an effort for the past few legislative sessions to remove the conscientious exemption for families when it comes to the MMR vaccine, the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. And this, the proposal includes, if parents do decide to not get the MMR vaccine, then their children would not be able to participate in public schooling or different childcare facilities. And so when this issue comes up, we're opposed to this on a number of levels. Families have concerns about, what stem cells are being used in this research or, potential vaccine related, concerns or injuries that they want to avoid. And so we're very much in support of families making their own
Yes.
medical decisions for their own children. And a good note about this, Cassie, is that there are very few public policy issues that really bring out the grassroots like this issue. When this had a hearing this legislative session, and there were so many testifiers in opposition to this, which was encouraging. And it did not pass, which we praise God for, because this is a significant thing, and I don't think it just stops at MMR. If they eventually get that passed, I think there will be movement into other health-related decisions and taking those decision-making rights away from parents. And so we'll continue to monitor that and keep our folks updated and helping you understand how you can take action.
Yeah, I think that's the key is helping our families know what can they do.
Yes.
What is the call to action that you would have for our families, for any family in Minnesota listening today,
Yes.
to help some of these efforts that really are important for Christian families to have their voices heard?
Yes, absolutely. I'd encourage you to sign up for our email updates. Minnesota Family Council's website is at mfc.org. You can sign up there. Legislative session is out right now. They'll come back after the election in January, and they'll be working on the state budget. So potentially, depending upon what happens with the election, the aid to non-public students will be considered potentially again. But I would encourage you to sign up because we help you know how you can engage, what kind of communications you can send to your state representative and state senator to urge them to vote a certain way, and just keep you informed on the issues overall. I'd encourage you to sign up. And then also, I'm sure you'll want to get into elections as well. We have some election-related resources.
Absolutely. And what would you say to an individual in our state that feels like, well, why would I bother voting? My vote won't really matter. We know how it's going to turn out. So what do you say to those folks that maybe are apprehensive of?
I love talking to those folks because my passion really is local government. I think that we've been trained to view government as sort of entertainment, and that's unfortunately oftentimes the way the federal government is treated. We kind of treat it as a sort of entertainment, but in reality, they're making decisions that govern us. And the more local you get, oftentimes the more tangible the realities of our election or our legislative system and who manages that are felt. And I think we really felt that during COVID. And so I just want to encourage folks to think about the fact that local elections are often very narrow. I looked up yesterday. I knew that the election for House District 54A, which is Shakopee, was really close, and I looked it up again. The 2024 results for that House representative seat were a 14-vote margin, which is wild. And you think about the fact that the House was split 67-67, could have gone a different way, but that seat was decided by a 14-vote margin. And so regardless of whether, there are concerns about our election system, which I have them too, I would encourage everyone to get out and vote, especially think about these local elections because they impact you and your family very strongly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our role as parents, as adults, are to provide that future for our children.
Yes.
And becoming involved and having a voice is so important. I have heard some statistics recently about the most unrepresented voice in voting is often the evangelical Christians. Is that true?
I've heard that as well. Yes, I think that is often the case. And I think it's really sad because there's this narrative that there's this narrative that's often cited called separation of church and state. I'm sure we've all heard this. And yet I argue that every decision made on a law is a moral decision, whether it's a speed limit decision
Yes.
or whether it's girls' sports. You know, every decision is a moral decision. Some are much more weighty than others. But it's important to think about who is informing the moral positions of the people making laws for us. And why wouldn't Christians say, hey, that's our responsibility to inform the moral consciences of people making law and to be a part of that discussion? And so I would just encourage us not to think of life as so separated. Christians should be engaged in all spheres, whether it's education, certainly education, but then also our governance. And I would encourage folks to be involved. I want to make one quick plug. I forgot to mention this. We do have our voter guide that comes out every general election. So we provide understanding as to where candidates stand on key issues that are related to our mission. That will be coming out this fall, and we will keep you updated on when that's coming out when you sign up for our emails.
Fantastic. Well, we've talked a lot about different topics that are so important. Is there any topic that we have not touched on that you want to make sure our families know about?
Yeah, I think we've covered it pretty well,
Okay,
Cassie.
good.
Yeah, I
Just
think
want to
so
make
much.
sure because
Yeah.
you're here and this is so important for all of us to
Yeah.
know about. I just want to thank you so much, Becca, for joining me today and sharing this really important information with our community and those who are tuning in from across the state and even the nation. We can look at this as an opportunity to get involved. And if nothing else, pray for our leaders. Pray that the Lord intervenes and guides our leadership to follow him and to support families here.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I just want to end with, we know that God is sovereign over all, and so he will exact justice in the end and mercy on all of these things.
He knows how it ends.
He knows how it ends. It's just our job to represent him. So that's how we see our role.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for all the
Thank
work
you,
that you
Cassie.
do and the Minnesota Family Council.
Thank you.
Love that there is this organization that is sharing our perspective as believers with the government. So thank you.
Thank you, Cassie.
Well, it was such an honor to have Becca here from Minnesota Family Council, and she shared so much information that is very relevant to all of us as believers, as people who love children and that are working with them. And so I encourage all of you to get involved with your local government, whether you're local here in our area or across the state or even the nation. This is important. It's vital times for us to really make our voice known. So please check out the link below. You can get more information from the Minnesota Family Council on that link. Also, please remember to like and subscribe to this podcast. It really helps us reach more people for Jesus. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.